Khan, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High God Yahweh, by Hashem and Mashiach Yahweh Shah. Today's video, we'll be going over writings on the wall. Writings on the wall. And the reason why I titled that video, well, we'll see here in a second. You know, I'm really going over Daniel chapter 5, but you'll see why I titled it writings on the wall. So let's just get right into it. Everybody, let's go to Daniel chapter 5, and I'm gonna start at verse 1. Daniel chapter 5 and verse 1. Let's get right into it. It says, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to a thousand of his lords, and drank wine before the thousands. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. So you got Belshazzar, which is not to be confused with Daniel, because we see early on in Daniel chapter 1, Daniel was given the name Belteshazzar. This is Daniel chapter 1 and verse 7, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar. So Belteshazzar is Daniel, and Belshazzar is Nebuchadnezzar's son. So when we're dealing with Belshazzar, this is obviously going into the Babylonian Empire, simply because he's Nebuchadnezzar's son, or Nebuchadnezzar's second, the king after Nebuchadnezzar. Now I'm gonna keep reading. It's like I'm reading verse 2 again. It says, Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines might drink therein. So, what were the vessels taken out of Jerusalem? This is This is Daniel chapter 1 verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his gods. And he brought the vessels into the treasures of his gods. So they took a lot of our vessels and our chalices and golden things out of the temple, and Nebuchadnezzar had brought it to his temple in Shinar, to his gods. Now we got Belshazzar bringing the vessels to him, that he may eat and drink out of it. Now let's go in verse 3, Daniel 5 and 3. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. So they took the holy vessels out of the house of the Lord, and they drank out of them. And while they drank out of them, while they were getting drunken, they literally praised their God. They praised the gods of gold, the gods of silver, the gods of brass, the gods of iron, the gods of wood, and the gods of stone. So these men that was under Belshazzar and Belshazzar himself were going extremely off. These brothers was going off so I don't know. But we're gonna see the punishment of Belshazzar and what happened to him for doing these things. So I'm trying to find a precept real quick. So this is Wisdom of Solomon chapter 14 and verse 27. It says, for the worshiping of idols not to be named is the beginning, the cause, and the end of all evil. For either they are mad when they be merry, or prophesy lies, or live unjustly, or else lightly forswear themselves. For in so much as their trust is in idols which have no life, though they swear falsely, yet they look not to be hurt. So the scriptures say that the worshiping of idols is the beginning, the cause, and the ending of all evil. And Belshazzar is finna begin some evil, and he caused the evil. But it's an evil that's finna come upon him, and that's finna overtake him and overthrow him. Now let's keep reading. This is Daniel 5 in verse 5. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. So what had happened was the king just seen a hand. That's all. It wasn't like it was attached to a body. It was just literally like probably from right here, gone, just hearing up, just writing. Verse 6, then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. So the king got utterly scared. The king got afraid, because how would you feel if you just seen a hand floating? You just seen something floating, and then you look closer, and it's just a hand, and it's just writing. And you're not dreaming, you're not hallucinating. You just see it, and it's like, oh man. It said that his knees smote together. That's a fearful thing. The Most High can send anything on you. The Most High can do anything. He can send a floating head your way to tell you something. You may not even see it coming. It's just a floating head. Yeah, I'm here to prophesy unto you. You're going to bug out. You're going to be afraid. Same thing with this hand. Hand may got a pen and he just writing. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. So I'm going to keep going. Verse 7. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom of heaven. So here's where the gift of tongues come in. The gift of knowing other languages. Because these men didn't know what language or what tongue that this hand wrote in. We're going to get what it said, but a lot of men, they not going to know. But it's somebody that did figure it out, and it's somebody that did know. Let's keep going. Verse 8. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and in his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom in whom the spirit of the holy gods, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. So now you got the queen. Now you got Belshazzar's wife coming up to him and telling him, hey, I know all these men can't interpret, I know all these men can't answer, but there is one man who dealt with your father, who dealt with Nebuchadnezzar. There is one man who your father made master over the Chaldeans. He made master over the soothsayers, astrologers, magicians, and the wise men. He made him lord over them. This brother is wise. The queen said he has the spirit of the holy gods. Because they believed in multiple gods. Like it said, they worshiped the gods of gold, silver, so on and so on. So they believed there was a multitude of gods that was in Daniel. But I'm going to keep going. Verse 12. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams, and showing of hard sentences, and dissolving of doubts, were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. So this says Daniel had an excellent spirit in knowledge and understanding and interpreting dreams and showing of hard sentences. Daniel had wisdom. Daniel had a magnitude of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. He can interpret your dream for you. He can tell you what this means. He can tell you what language this was spoken in. He can tell you this, that, and the third. You know? What man is like Daniel? This is Daniel chapter 5 and verse 13. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought in out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that the light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men and astrologers have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, but they could not show the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. So Belshazzar, you know, kind of spitting to Daniel. Look, man, I heard you did this. I heard you did that. I heard you can, you know, do all these things and make interpretations and so on and so forth. So here's what I'm gonna do. If you can interpret this unto me, if you could interpret this writing unto me, I will give you clothing of scarlet, you know, which is a royal color. I'll make you third ruler in heaven, not in heaven, Shalakia, the third ruler in the kingdom. You know, I give you everything. I give you a chain about your neck. Just please make known unto me this dream. Please let me know what is going on. Con, this is Daniel 5 and 17. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king and make known to him the interpretation. So Daniel didn't want none of his stuff. He didn't want what the king had. He didn't want the chain. He didn't want the scarlet. He didn't want to become the third ruler. He didn't want all that. Daniel like, man, I'm here for one reason. I'm here to give you an interpretation. You know, anything that's given to me, the Most High God will give it to me. I don't need you to give it to me. Verse 18. O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. So it says the Most High God gave that to him. Hold on. Let me see if I can find this precept. Because the Most High God does, he sets up men. He sets up men of, he sets up a lot of men to rule, you know. This is Proverbs chapter 21 and 1. It says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. So the mind of the king is in the hands of the Lord. The Lord can do whatsoever he wants with the king, to the king. He can glorify the king. He can give the king glory. He can give the king whatever he wants. You know, he can make him on high. He can make them the greatest in all the earth. That's exactly what he did with Nebuchadnezzar. You know, it was a couple times that he called Nebuchadnezzar his servant. You know, the Most High was dealing with Nebuchadnezzar. Not the same way that he would deal with an Israelite. But this is Jeremiah 27:6. And now have I given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and the beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him. So the Most High gave everything. He got the whole world under Nebuchadnezzar. That's what Daniel is saying right now. This is Daniel 5 and 19. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him, whom he slew, and whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he set up, and whom he would he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. So when Nebuchadnezzar, if you read about earlier chapters in Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar's heart got pride. It got prideful. You know, he was boasting about his own. He was thinking he was doing this on his own. Like, you know, these are my works, and, you know, I rule, and so on and so forth. Bow down to my gods. He even threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the flame. You know? But Nebuchadnezzar, at the end of the day, always knew, it always came back to him humbling himself down and knowing that the Most High God had set him up. Because the Most High God had turned him into a beast of the field. He made feathers grow on him. His hands and his feet were like claws, or like eagle's claws. He turned him into a beast and a base of man. And he lost his glory. He lost that throne. He made Nebuchadnezzar go crazy and go insane. He literally dwelt in the field. He wasn't in the king's palace. He dwelt in the field. Most High God, like, okay, you want to exalt yourself? I'm going to humble you. I'm going to make you a base man. And that's what Daniel going over. Because Nebuchadnezzar was a man. That's what Daniel was just going over. Nebuchadnezzar was a man that if he wanted you dead, you're dead. If he wanted you alive, you was alive. If he wanted you to do something, you'd do it. So on and so forth. That's the kind of king Nebuchadnezzar was. He was a powerful king. The whole world was under his dominion. Now, let me keep going. This is Daniel 5:21. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew not that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of man, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will. So Nebuchadnezzar, like I already said, he was driven out. He was eating grass like oxen, so on and so forth. He lost his understanding until he found out that the Most High God was the one that ruleth in the kingdom of men, and that the Most High God will set over whom he want to set over. But Daniel is explaining this to Belshazzar for a reason, and we're going to find out. Verse 22. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. So Daniel is telling him, you didn't humble your heart, but you knew everything that happened to your father. You knew every time that he got a little bit of pride, he was cast down to the ground. Every time he boasted himself up, every time he thought that the kingdom was his and that he ruled by his own strength and that he had got the kingdom from his own works, he got thrown down to the ground. You seen what happened to your father. You knew all this, but you didn't humble yourself. Your heart grew with pride. You know? That's something that the Most High hates. He hates pride. The scriptures say that pride was not made for men. But let's keep going. Verse 23. But has lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives and thy concubines, have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and in whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. So Daniel's like, you praised all these other gods. You worshipped all these other gods. You even took the Most High God's vessels out of his house to worship other gods, which see not, which hear not, which know not. You did all this, but you didn't glorify the God whom your breath is in. Basically meaning whom your life is in. Most High God, he has your life in control. He can kill you in an instant. He can make you great. He can add years unto your life. That's what he did to King Hezekiah. He added 15 years into King Hezekiah's life. But Daniel is saying, but thou, Belshazzar, you didn't humble yourself. After you knew all of this, you went and worshipped other gods. You didn't even praise the Most High God in whose vessel you're drinking out of. You know, that's heavy. That's real heavy. That's deep. But let's keep going. Verse 24. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. So, after Belshazzar had did all this boasting, did all this glorifying of himself, after did all this worshiping of idols, that's when the Most High God said, that's enough. He sent that hand. He sent that floating hand to give a message. Now let's see. Verse 25. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, tekel, upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Meaning, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. So, Daniel is saying the Most High numbered your kingdom, your empire, everything that you're about. He numbered it, weighed it in the balance. It's finished. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Weighed you in, like I said, he weighed you in the balance. And when it says you found wanting, it means you found lacking. You're lacking. It's unbalanced. You know? Like the scriptures say, a false balance is an abomination to the Most High God. Verse 28. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So let me grab a quick precept, because hold on. This is Sirach 10 and 8. I'm gonna start at 7. Pride is hateful before God and man, and by both doth one commit iniquity. Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. So the Chaldeans and the Babylonians, they was ruling. You know, Belshazzar was ruling. But by unrighteous dealings, riches got by deceit, injury, so on and so forth, pride, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. And we see right here that the kingdom was translated to the Persian and Medes. Now during this time, the Persian and Medes, they were growing and they were taking over. It's called the Achaemenid Empire, or Achaemenid Empire. You can look it up. And they were taking over literally everything. It's a YouTube channel called Kings and Generals, and they got one going over Cyrus the Great. Watch that video and you'll see how everything lines up with how the fall of Babylon had happened. It even records that Belshazzar died in the nighttime, because the Persian and the Medes army had drew up upon them in nighttime, because they were celebrating, and the Babylonians were celebrating and worshiping and getting drunk and drinking, and they kind of fell slack, you know. And just like it said, verse 30, Daniel 5 and 30, in that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain. So when you watch that video, you'll figure out how the Persians and the Medes is trying to move in and besiege Babylon, basically. And while all that is going on, you got Daniel in the midst of it. It don't say this, but we know through the scriptures, Daniel is in the midst of it, giving that interpretation, giving this prophecy that's about to come to pass. He's telling Belshazzar that the Persians and Medes is finna come take over. Why? Because your iniquity. Because you like to worship other gods. Because you didn't pay the Most High God respect. You didn't praise the Most High God. You didn't worship the Most High God. So the Persians and Medes is finna come over and take over. You know? And within that same night, within a blink of an eye, here come the Persians and Medes. Quickly. I got a couple precepts. This is Daniel chapter 7 and verse 5. It says, and behold, another beast, a second like unto a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. Who is this bear going into? This bear is going into the Persian and Medes Empire, or the Medo-Persian Empire. Why did the bear raise up on one side? Is because the Persians had took over the Medes capital, which is Ecbatana, or Bektane. I can't remember how to pronounce it. I think it's Ecbatana. But you can look all of this up. The Persians taking over the Medes, because the Persians was more, they were greater than the Medes, even though it is a Medo-Persian Empire. But that's why the bear raised up on one side. It says that they also had 3 ribs in their mouth, that the bear had 3 ribs within his mouth. What do those 3 ribs represent? What do those 3 ribs mean? It means it's going into the 3 empires that the Persian Medes took over. First, you got the Lydian Empire. The bear took over the Lydian Empire and conquered them and took their general. Their general was made to help Cyrus, basically. He was there to he was basically like an informant type deal. So once they took over the Lydian Empire, they grabbed the general. Now they added somebody else to their war tactics. After the Lydian Empire, who do you have? You have the Babylonian Empire, which is what we're reading about right now, which is the final conquest of the Babylonian Empire. That their kingdom being done. That head of gold being done away with. That head of gold on the image that Daniel gave the breakdown of Nebuchadnezzar. Now the kingdom is being translated unto the Persians and Medes. So you got 2 ribs already. Lydian Empire, which they took over. Babylonian Empire, which they took over. And after that, you got the Egyptian Empire. You know, that's why it says arise and devour much flesh. Because the Persian and Medes, they were going through conquering everything. They were taking over everything. They were the new world power. They were the hegemony. You know, look that word up. It's a good word to know. But all of this can be seen within the within history. You know, the history is gonna line up with the prophecy all the time. But Lord willing, somebody was edified. I didn't want to make this a long video. That's what happened over on the writings of the wall, and between Belshazzar and Daniel, and the pride of Belshazzar, and how he got taken down, and how he got conquered. So with that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Hamashiach Yahushua, Shalom, Ma'abrak, Mashpakah, Shalom.